He is a certified ski instructor, whitewater river guide, a high school ultimate Frisbee coach, and an insurance agency specialist who believes that after love, sales makes the world go round. Aww. Upon completing his service as an airborne trained Army officer in Cold War Berlin, Sheldon cut his teeth as a commission-only sales rep, where his success led to a promotion as the Northeast sales trainer for the world's third largest travel franchise company, Uniglobe Travel International. At the turn of the millennium, he launched SteadySales.com to help service people sell, and for the last 10 years, he's focused exclusively on coaching the staff of insurance carriers, independent agencies across the United States. He's coached hundreds of agencies and thousands of CSRs in collaboration with dozens of national and regional carriers, state associations, and industry partners. So whether it's high school athletes, terrified guests, or experienced insurance pros, Sheldon's energetic coaching flows from two guiding principles: meet people where they are and ignite their own desire to improve. So with that, Encompass Sales, please join me in welcoming Sheldon Snodgrass to the stage.
I'm your constant companion. I'm your greatest helper and your heaviest burden. I will push you onward or I will pull you down. I am completely at your command. I am easily managed. You must merely be firm with me. Show me exactly how you want something done, and after a few lessons, I will do it automatically. I am the servant of all great people, and alas, all failures as well. Those who are great, I have made great. Those who are not, I have made them too. You may run me for profit or run me for ruin. It makes no difference to me. Take me, train me, be firm with me, and I will lay the world at your feet. Ignore me, and I will ruin you. What am I? What am I? I'm not the answer to the riddle, but I promise it will be revealed through the course of our remarks together. So I have to confess that I'm not telling you now, and I will further confess that I have never sold insurance. Insurance is not what I study except by association and collaboration and observation with the people in your world every day, in the same journals that you read every day. What I study and teach in practice is organizational behavior, psychology, personal development, sales and marketing, and I apply it exclusively in the lens of the independent agency world and the carriers who serve them. And as you heard during the introduction, and as you can see from these photos of me, actually me in other uniforms, I have the privilege to coach in other domains as well. So I run a nationally ranked Ultimate Frisbee program at Northampton High School. I'm a level 2 certified ski instructor, alpine ski instructor. There are 3 levels. And I'm a certified whitewater river guide. So I coach on whitewater, I coach on the slopes, I coach on the athletic field, and I coach CSRs. That's me in front of a group of folks at Bankers Insurance, a place that, I don't know if you have an appointment, but if Bankers Insurance is one of your clients, multi-locations in North Carolina and Virginia. So I coach in these domains, and what I want to share with you is the overlapping threads that emerge when I think about improving outcomes, no matter what they are. Because that's what we're here talking about, our results, our outcomes. But beyond just sharing what are these overlapping threads of success in our pursuit of improving outcomes, I also want to light a spark that ignites you to take action in an area where you've stalled or where you struggle, whether it's personally or professionally. And no matter what your attitude is, no matter how charged you up, there are areas, if you just take a pause and reflect, either personally or professionally, where we stall or struggle. So where do we stall or struggle? And no doubt we could find some commonalities in terms of what we face every day in the marketplace and when we get up and have to go and do our work. But it's how we respond to these struggles that makes them uniquely our own, our personal responses to these struggles and to these challenges, to say nothing of where we are in our professional careers. Whether it's newbies or grizzled veterans, we have you intermixed in the room. So that makes our response to these struggles unique. But what I want to do is I want to talk about the common threads that emerge when we try to surmount these struggles or these obstacles or these challenges. Call them what you will. I use all those terms interchangeably. And if you think of overcoming challenges or overcoming obstacles as synonymous with personal growth, we have our first insight into why it can become so difficult. It's because personal growth is synonymous, or professional growth or changing outcomes is synonymous with personal growth. And personal growth is synonymous with behavior change. And behavior change is synonymous with habit change. And if you believe that, then you have to believe that most of our business problems are actually personal problems masquerading as business problems. Now that's to take nothing away from macroeconomic forces or macro political forces that we heard about, things that we have no control over. Most of the things we do, right? It's our response to those things. So that's why I say, and that's why I believe that most of our business problems, whether it's the highest levels of the corporation that we have in this room represented by executive leadership, or a brand new territory sales consultant, right? It's personal challenge. So if you believe that, then what I want to do is I want to begin with beliefs. I want to begin with beliefs, and I'm going to pull from the work of Daniel Pink, a master researcher and author who's got a dozen books to his name. And I want to pull with one that he penned in 2012. Those of you in leadership positions, as an aside, I highly recommend the book Drive. Read that one before you read To Sell is Human. Drive is about intrinsic motivation versus extrinsic motivation in advancing behavior change. But that's a detour. What matters about To Sell is Human is in this book, Daniel Pink posits that in the modern service economy, we are all in sales now. Now, there's no denying that with the people in this room, but take this message to the CSRs, many of whom say, what about sales? My job is service, I don't sell. Right? I mean, that's beginning to change in the more progressive agencies. So he posits that we're all in sales now, and he sets about writing this book to describe what we have to do about that, right? And it's not a stretch to believe that we're all in sales now, in the service economy, when you think about the ability of one person to influence the fate of a small business. You just think about Yelp, or Chowhound, if you're a restaurant, Google reviews, right? One bad review from a bad interaction with someone who doesn't see themselves in sales could do real damage to the business. Agreed? Right. So he writes this book and says, okay, here's what we're facing, and here's what I think we should do about it, what I recommend you do about it. And I want to point to a study that he commissioned. And as part of his research, he surveyed almost 10,000 people. He hired a firm called Qualtrics. Now, you should know that in most standard polling organizations like Gallup and so forth, a standard sample size is about 1,000. So this was a massive and rigorous study. 9,052, I believe, was the exact number, if my memory serves. So almost 10,000 people, and he asked them a whole series of questions, two of which I want to point to you now, and I'm going to, in a nod to the millennials and the gray hairs like me, I've got both of the hosts from Family Feud. One of these guys would now not even be able to be on television because he'd get lawsuits for sexual harassment. Because I think he kissed and tapped the behind of every woman that went up on stage right now, right? Richard Dawson, otherwise known as, come on. What was it? Hogan's Heroes. His name escapes me. Doesn't matter. Okay, so he asked a series of questions, two of which I want to share, one of which is on the board right now. And admittedly, this is a very biased sample, right? We are a sales-driven organization. We are sales professionals in a sales conference hearing from a sales coach at a sales meeting, correct? This was 10,000 people randomized scientific survey. So I want you to project yourself into a neutral environment, perhaps at a shopping mall where you're waiting for someone slurping on your orange Julius. And someone comes up with the name tag and a clipboard and says, hey, would you mind taking a survey? To which you say, sure, no problem. Again, you have your sales hat off. That's the position from which I want you to think about your answer to this very first question. When you think of the word sales or selling, what's the first words that come to mind? You needn't yell them out. I know that you're going to be antsy to participate, and believe me, you're going to have an opportunity to do that because we're going to get together for 3 hours, right? So I'm going to go just shy of 90 minutes now. We're going to take a break, and then we're going to get super interactive so you can take home some wisdom and actually apply it in the field. So consider this question. When you think of the word sales or selling, what do you think? What's coming to mind? There's words coming to your mind right now. You're having mental associations. Again, in a neutral setting, imagine how you would answer the words. Just take a moment. If I see a couple people picking up pens, that's great. What comes to mind when you hear the word sales or selling, when you imagine yourself in that environment, not this one? Now, I want to rely on the collective wisdom here to know what these two hosts say right before they reveal an answer, okay? And the answer is in the form of a word cloud that Daniel Pink produced. He took how many survey questions? Almost 10,000, put them on a single page in the form of a word cloud. Now, those of you who are familiar with that term will know that it's a mashup of all the responses, and the size of the word corresponds to the frequency of the occurrence. Got it? The bigger the word, the more it showed up in the survey, 10,000 surveys strong, right? A randomized sample of middle America, us, the people that we serve and the people that our agencies serve. And on the count of 2, I just want to hear your best Richard Dawson impression. 1, 2. That was totally weak in the front rows right here. Come on, people. You never watched Family Feud. On the count of 2. 1, 2. When you think the word sales or selling, what do you think? I think it's pushy. I think it's sleazy. I think it's annoying. I think it's bothersome. I think it's hard. I think it's yucky. I think it's uncomfortable. That represents most people's immediate intuitive associations with the word sales or selling. And since no one here would dare to admit to having those associations, let me just up the ante and say words like quota, sales script, cold call, overcome objection, trial close. Now what happens? Some of you are getting aroused by those words, okay? But some of you might also be getting a little bit intimidated. You think, wow, I'm okay with that, but what if I ever said that to a CSR or to an agent? Then what would happen? Now, there's a few, I don't have my glasses, so I don't dare press the wrong button. I want to point to, where's the pointer? Bam. I want to point to the outliers. Oh, that's not going to show up on the screen. Disregard. Next to the word pushy, right side, above manipulative. There you are, outliers, people like me, and those of you in the room. If we answered this survey right here, right now, you would say fun, essential, important. I would hope. And if not, that's okay too, because there's a part of you who also might have had some negative associations. And that's okay. Because we're speaking to our customers, and they're speaking to their customers. And this is what they're coming to the table with. So just for fun, I want to share the final answer, or the final question in the survey. So he asked, in addition to what are the words that you think of when you hear the word sales or selling? And I, Sheldon Snodgrass, am up in the ante by saying, what do you think of when you hear words like rehearse or role play or sales script or trial close or overcome objection or quota? What do you think? Right? We move more into the realm of yuck. I would suspect for some of us. So the second to the last question, or the last question was, when you picture sales or selling, what do you picture? When you picture sales or selling, what do you picture? Okay, on the count of 2. 1, 2. How many people, raise your hand if you had that in your mind, or guy in suit, or cheesy suit, or something, right? And so if I asked you, or if I asked audience members at an agency, large or small, when you think of car salesmen, what do you think? And then what? We're right back here. Correct? So these are associations. These are ingrained beliefs that we have, very often subconscious beliefs. And I say we in the collective we. Again, I don't want to accuse anybody here of feeling like you have negative associations with sales or selling. But somewhere they lurk. Somewhere they lurk. So what do we do about this reality? What do we do about the fact that overwhelmingly we, whether it's us or our customers, or their customers' customers, have these negative associations? What do you do about that? Do we just bowl through? I mean, take a moment to think about when you were sad and someone said, don't be sad. How useful was that? Or if you were depressed and someone says, don't be depressed. That's just dumb. That doesn't work. You didn't say, hey, don't think of sales, I'm talking to CSR. Don't think of it as pushy, annoying, or sleazy, or manipulative. Just think of it as giving good service. I mean, well, that's true. You can't just shift like that. Think about an experience when you or a loved one was feeling emotionally stuck. You can't just shift and say, okay, I'm going to adopt this mindset. There's a process, and that process begins, at least in my estimation, with shining a light on that truth. Yes, I need to sell. Yes, sales is important. Yes, sales is how I keep the lights on. And yes, I'm afraid to sell. Yes, I feel intimidated. Yes, I feel like I have these negative associations. That's where it begins. And not to cut too close to home for anybody, but I can say this because it cuts close to home in my family. People that are struggling with addiction, the first thing that they say at their very first meeting, actually every meeting, when you introduce yourself is what? Hi, I'm an addict. Hi, my name is, and I'm an addict. You don't say, hi, my name is, but there's all kinds of reasons I've been driven to drink. Let me talk about those excuses. No way. You go into it, right? And you name it. So what do we do about this reality? We shine a light on it. And I want to use this formula to begin to shine a light, because we are here to talk about the R in this formula. In fact, your agencies exist, at least the agency owners. That's why they hung out a shingle for that R. I could also say O or G, which stands for outcomes, goals. The R in this case stands for, what's a synonym? Results. Thank you. So we tend to want to focus on results, as we should, because that's what keeps the lights on and that's what keeps paying for fantastic events like this. So when you think about what shapes results in your life, it begins with the letter A. What is it? Come on, you don't have to whisper. I heard attitude. I heard action. I heard attitude. This is like the taste great, less filling debate we could jump into right now. Raise your hand if you think it's attitude that shapes your results. Come on. Raise your hand if you think it's action. Now raise both hands and say, is it both? I would argue that it's action. Why? For two reasons. Number one, attitude shows up earlier, before our action. But I would also argue that actions or attitude are a product of your actions in the moment, every moment strung together. Think about courage. There's a great scene in the movie Three Kings when George Clooney is talking to a terrified private who's got to cross a firing line. And George Clooney says, "You're scared, aren't you?" He goes, "Yeah." He goes, "Well, you got to go. You just have to go and do this thing." And the guy says, "I don't have the courage." And he says, "You got to go and do the thing that scares you, and then you get the courage." And the private says, "Well, that don't make no sense. Like, in other words, can I have the courage first, then I can go do this thing?" No, you got to go do the thing again and again and again, and then the courage comes. I don't want to go off too deep and end philosophizing about that, but I believe, first of all, you will see that attitude shows up earlier, and in many respects, it can be the product of doing that thing that scares you or doing that thing that stretches you until such time as it no longer scares or stretches you. Okay? So I can also tell you, and those of you who still are thinking it's attitude, certainly over the long haul, you have to have it. But I can confess to this. None of you all can confess to this. How many of you work at home, by the way? How many of you? Oh, okay. None of you have the challenge that I'm just going to admit to in a show of vulnerability with things like YouTube. So I show up at my desk with a grand plan to execute, to get the results that I want. And all of a sudden, I sense this stirring of anxiety and avoidance. And I say, you know what? I got to just click this YouTube link that a buddy sent. It's only going to be 30 seconds. And once I do that, I'll get going on this thing. Another time, my first commission-only sales job, Uniglobe Travel. It was 100% pure cold calling, commission only in Boston's corporate jungle way back in the day. This is the first sales job that I had after a little detour in Mexico, smoking weed and scuba diving after the Army, okay? So yeah, ponytail and a dashiki for almost 9 months. Then I get to Sirius, I get this job, and I show up ready to take the world by storm. I follow the Uniglobe way. I got my tabletop flip chart, and I show up at my desk, and I've got this index cards. Yes, no CRM, index cards. And all of a sudden, I'm like, okay, 100 cold calls today. Let me just organize the desk drawer first. Let me just organize my desk drawer because it's a clutter and I can't concentrate. That's the action. No amount of attitude in the moment to say, I'm going to take the world by storm, say I'm fired up, I'm going to do this, would replace actually picking up the phone. It's action. It's the bridge between the outer world and the inner world. So what comes before action? It begins with the letter F. Focus is a type of action. Fear is an example of it. Feelings, exactly. You could call it emotion. So fear, we're not always driven by fear. Sometimes you act because you're excited to do this thing. You wake up early. I woke up at 3 a.m. not because I was excited to actually come here, right? So it wasn't misery or fear that drove me. It was excitement. You might also say, well, it was an obligation. That's true too. That's true too. But we're not always, just think about the results that we have in life. Say you want to play the ukulele. The action is you actually have to pick up the thing and go through your scales. The feeling is one of either excitement or, oh God, it's hard, it's arduous. Now I'm into the world of what comes before feelings. It's hard, it's arduous, it's repetitive, I don't want to do it, they're going to say no. What are all those examples of? Begins with a T? Thoughts. It's your inner dialogue. It's the thoughts. So I'm a big believer in paying attention to the inner world concurrent with the outer world. Again, remember, action is the bridge between the two. Results are what we focus on. Results are what we talk about. Results are what we want. But everything that goes on in here, we tend not to. We're very isolated and alone in that. And I say, hey, how do you feel about actually you, Miss CSR, picking up the phone? You've got 100 monoline auto in your book of business, and you've got 100 monoline home, and you've got home and auto, but no life. How would you feel about we actually pick up the phone and call them? And the first thought is, if you were CSR and I asked you to do that, what's your first thought? Think like the standard CSR. No? Why? It's not my job. It's hard. I'm going to get voicemail anyway. They don't want it. I'm going to have to be perceived as, right? On and on it goes, a cascade of thoughts which generate feelings. Now, what's at the root of that? Begins with the letter B. Exactly, your beliefs. Now, where beliefs end and thoughts begin doesn't much matter. In fact, where the line between any of the B, the T, and the F are doesn't matter to me. The truth is, it's half the equation. It's your inner world. In fact, when I showed this to my wife, who's a clinical psychologist, she says, actually, Sheldon, your formula is wrong. Very often, there's research that points to the fact that feelings come before thoughts. And you might think about that if you going up in the morning and you have a teenage daughter and she's left a trail of destruction in the house that you went in the kitchen and you went to bed and it was clean. Your first reaction is that, wow, she must have forgotten the lesson I talked about contributing to the household. Your first reaction is WTF, like you have an emotional response, right? You have an emotional response. And I'm being silly about that, but it's true. So I'm not here to quibble about the fight, flight, or freeze response. That exists, and it can paralyze us. And then we start to think about it. Again, it doesn't matter. In our daily lives, it's typically a thought that holds us down. And again, the results show up no matter if it's we want to appoint new agents, or we want to increase retention at an agency, or new business at an agency. All of those are results. But it also shows up if you want to learn to speak Swahili, play the ukulele, lose 5 pounds, run a 10K, or fight less with your teenage children. All of those are results, and all of those follow this simple formula. And if you agree with this formula, then we have a brilliant graphic, one of my favorites of all. The only thing bad about this is the word has become a cliche. Anytime we want to advance past our current level of performance, that is, achieve new results, we have to surmount the status quo, AKA, what's in the middle of the circle? It's your comfort zone, right? And it kills me that this has become a cliche in every Gatorade commercial and people are saying, get comfortable being uncomfortable. The truth of the matter is you can call that status quo, current performance, flat line, baseline, plateau, whatever it is, there you are. It's a product of a lifetime of habits and patterns and routines. And hear me very carefully, you should operate there until such time as you want to learn to speak Swahili, ride a unicycle, fight less with your teenage daughter, lose 5 pounds, or sell more insurance, right? Because you've achieved a level of performance that is either satisfactory, in which case you don't need to stretch, or it's unsatisfactory. And the message I'm getting here loud and clear, even from the conference calls, is there is no way we are not going outside of this circle. The word growth doesn't move into the circle. The only way that you do it is by pushing up against the periphery from within, repeatedly. And what happens, and what is so brilliant about that formula, which isn't mine, stolen from Mahatma Gandhi and T. Harv Eker, by the way, I forgot to say that it was Gandhi who said, it's our beliefs that become our thoughts, which becomes our words, which become our actions, which become our habits, which become our values, which become our destiny. I didn't go so far as to destiny, I was just BTFAR, to illustrate that if results by definition lie outside of this circle. So by definition, if we accept that, we have to find ways to push from within. But it can be difficult, particularly if we're bumping up against limiting beliefs, apprehensions, fears, anxieties, intimidation, a sense that, okay, you're not a CSR, but you run parallel to CSRs. How about this one? You got to go into an agency and deal with the fact that you have a black eye from a history or from rates that aren't as competitive. We see that that's meeting now, right? The rates are now coming back into parity. But that can be a big ask. That can be anxiety-provoking to imagine yourself having to have a conversation with a bunch of CSRs that said, well, I would write you, but you ain't in my top 3 and you're not going to be because your rates are all out of whack. I guess I can't blame you. Let me just go to the next day. Like, how do you respond to that? Certainly you all have your ways to respond to that, and I'm not suggesting that it's sheepish. But I want to talk about the pressure that a big ask can put on us. The inner dialogue, the inner voice, what effect that can have. And I want to turn to some experts that we all know and can relate to. Ladies and gentlemen, I want to give you The Incredibles.
You can handle it.
India Golf 909er transmitting in the blind guard. Disengage, repeat, disengage! Disengage, repeat, disengage!
No! Call off the missiles, I'll do anything!
Too late. 15 years too late.
Friendlies at 20 miles south, southwest of your position. Angels 10, track east. Disengage, over. Bye! You have to put a force field around the plane.
But you said we weren't supposed to use our
I
powers.
know what I said. Listen to what I'm saying now. Disengage, repeat, disengage! Violet! Mayday, mayday! India Golf 909er is buddy spiked. Abort, abort! There are children aboard. Say again, there are children aboard that...
No!
Put a field around us now!
I've never done one that big.
Violet, do it now! Abort, abort, abort! Abort, abort, abort!
Do it now! Do it now, Mom, I've never done one that big. Hurry up, do it now, right? Thank God we never experienced that kind of pressure. But her response reveals something about what happens when we have big tasks ahead of us and big asks ahead of us. And when you have a big ask like that, it feels like we have to go big in response. And I want you to think about what a big ask does to your inner dialogue. Now, some of you might be completely inspired and motivated by a big ask. And I would suspect that actually most of you are. In fact, I found your words very inspirational, the folks that spoke before us about here's where we were, here's where we are, and here's where we're going. I'm like, yeah, I felt like a fighter getting ready. I just took a bunch of knocks in prior rounds. I'm coming out with black eyes and bloody lips, but I'm full of fire and ready to take it on some more. So I want to talk a little bit about how you translate a big ask in the inner dialogue that results to daily execution. And who you have in front of you right now is a slide of the British cycling coach named David Brailsford. And David Brailsford in 2010 was brought into the British cycling team to break a 100-year drought for British cycling in the Tour de France. 100 years of never having won the Tour de France. And he set a goal to within 5 years win the Tour de France after 100 of not winning. This was 2010. In 2012, British riders took first and second place. They repeated the feat in 2013 and then again in 15, 16, 17. Dominated the Tour de France. And when he was asked about this, he coined the phrase, the aggregation of marginal gains. Now, it's a complicated way to capture the phrase, an apple a day keeps the doctor away. Meaning you can't eat 30 apples at the end of the month and expect to have the same health benefit that you get from having an apple a day. And so what Brailsford did is he took apart everything that goes in to riding and winning on a bicycle and looked for 1% gains, from the weight of the saddle to the weight and the diameter of the tires to the sleeping patterns of the athletes to what it is that they were eating. Everything he tore it apart and was looking for marginal gains. Marginal gains, not the huge asks. It's like, hey, David Brailsford, you got to win the Tour de France for the country. Eek, what am I going to do? What I'm going to do is I'm going to pay attention to the little teeny stuff that drives the big stuff. And in finance, this might be called the beauty of compounding interest. You don't see it in the first month of the quarter or the year. It's only after many, many cycles or periods, whatever you're measuring, that begins to show up. And you can think about this in your personal lives as well. Remember, BTFAR. Results flow from the actions that you take, whatever the results are. But when you're looking for big results, it can be deceiving to focus on big actions instead of the little ones a day. And you can think about this in your personal lives. Would you notice a difference if you chose to eat kale salad instead of cheesecake today? If that was an important result for you, some health outcome, you wouldn't notice. You wouldn't feel different. You wouldn't see it different, nor would you see it the second day, nor would you see it the third day. What if your result was, I'm going to improve the relationship that I have with my spouse? Are you going to change that relationship or your children with one kind word that day? Will you see a big difference? No, it's the next day and the next day. It's the aggregation of kind words. And the bad news about this is it shows up in the red line as well. It's one repeated bad choice. And it's not even maybe a bad choice, a choice that says, I'm not going to do this thing. It's just another hour on Facebook. It's another 10 minutes. It's a hit the snooze button. Again, whatever the results are that we want to focus on. So when I thought about David Brailsford's victory and how he got to such a momentous win, it wasn't momentous work. It was the work of daily discipline in small gains, paying attention to the things that can boost us as well as attention to the things that bring us down. And I thought, okay, well, that's a great theory. How can we manifest that? How can we actualize and take that theory into our daily lives? And since I spend so much time with CSRs in the field, I thought, I'm going to share what I share with them because I think in many ways your experience parallels theirs, territory sales consultants. And we can talk more about that in the workshop session. So if we want to stay in the sweet spot of growth, I say, there's basically 4 things that emerge. And I see this whether or not you're trying to deal with the terror on skis and the awkwardness on skis or a slope, or dealing with the disappointment of a loss in a close game or the pressure of a close game, or in the sales environment at the agency. These same 4 things emerge that keep us in the sweet spot of growth or continuous improvement. These same 4 things. And they're known by lots of different names, the truth is. As a sales coach, and as I mentioned during my introduction, what I study, teach, and practice, in addition to organizational behavior and psychology and personal growth, is sales and marketing. And I can't tell you how many sales books have a different sales model. The 7 steps to sales success, the 4 critical elements to sales effectiveness. And as I distill all these 10 and these 12 and these 7 and these 3 elements to critical effectiveness, what I realize is these same 4 common threads emerge all the time. And we have to pay attention to these ourselves if we want to stay in the sweet spot of continuous improvement. Now, to be fair, this image should be an animated GIF file with these circles expanding and contracting like blobs, moving in and out of them, out of each other, because we can't constantly be as symmetrical as this graph would imply. So what are these 4 elements? And you'll see what I mean when I say it shouldn't be this symmetrical. We come in and out of a place of motivation and inspiration and readiness and willingness, commitment, desire. All of those are synonyms for what I call buy-in. You've got to want to do it. Why would we stretch ourselves outside of that comfort zone when we know human nature is to revert? Well, because there's a payoff. That word growth is meaningful, whether it's more commissions or more recognition, a better relationship with your wife, the joy that you get from playing a musical instrument, the fluency you feel when you travel abroad because you've learned a foreign language, right? Those are all results. And in order to enjoy that result, you've got to make yourself uncomfortable, sometimes by that much, sometimes by bounds, by yards. But we tend to avoid it. And the way to avoid the avoidance is to want to do it, is to be bought in. So do you hear what I mean when I say this is synonymous for things like commitment, willingness, desire, belief? You're with me. It's known by lots of different names. So you could pick up a different book that wasn't written by Sheldon Snodgrass. By the way, I do have a book in process. It's a 5-year journey. It's called The Anxious Salesman. Maybe I could do a pre-release of some few chapters to you guys. You got to want to do this thing, okay? So once you're bought in, what do you suppose is this next? And remember, we're talking about these 4 overlapping circles of the sweet spot. And the reason we're talking about this is because our natural human tendency is to avoid leaving that circle. Correct? You're tracking with me. So to stay in that sweet spot, we need to want to do it. We have to be bought in. Now think like an agent. What's the next thing that you need to have? This one's a little bit more nuanced and a little bit more mysterious. In fact, it's so obvious that we tend to miss it. When you think about growth, okay, so let's zero in. I'm going to stop talking about personal growth mixed with professional growth, losing 5 pounds, running a marathon. I'm going to talk about selling. Let's suppose that my objective at the agency is to cross-sell more and account round more in my monoline book. Let me just back up. When you think about agency growth, it can come from a variety of places. Improve the close ratio with new business quotes, right? I got to improve my close rate with that. Well, I got to drive those quotes. So that's a marketing play. I got to improve that. What about just getting referrals from my current book of business? That would drive growth, would it not? Yes? What about proactively picking up the phone and account rounding? That would drive growth, right? I'm going to pull my monoline list and make some calls. What about improving the effectiveness of my inbound service calls? That is bridging from task to ask. Do you hear? These are all potential areas of growth. Right. Every one of these I could choose to, as an agency owner, focus on to help my agency grow. What's the problem with that? It's a violation of the second circle. If I said, hey, you're focused on outbound account agency, you're my team focused on outbound account rounding, you're going to cross-sell from our commercial to our personal, you're going to focus on generating referrals, and I just want you to all to go do that. The point is that if you're a team, the only way that you could do the third circle, which is practice, is to focus. I can't expect you to master a dialogue about asking for a referral at the same time asking you to master a dialogue about overcoming objections, outbound messaging effectiveness when you're calling, right? Don't we get voicemail when we call in the middle of the day to round? So what are you going to say? Beep, go. You're going to improvise right there? No. I want to practice. If we're going to make 10, 20, 30 calls a week, a month, a day, whatever the number is, shouldn't we do this? Okay, Sheldon, enough about the agency life. What about my life? Well, you're calling on agents. How about we focus on, well, you tell me, TSC, TSCs, this one goes for you. What would be the equivalent of, in your world, of what the agency here when a customer says, I want you to remarket my policy to get a cheaper rate? That's one of the perennial pain points of agencies, remarket pressure. Agreed? That's what I get all the time. They're just saying, hey, Sheldon, I'm getting all this pressure. People's rates went up 2, 3, 5, 10, 25%, and they're calling saying, shop my better rate. So what's the equivalent for you of price pressure? When you go into an agency, what do they say to you? Come on, TSCs, we're going to pick on a veteran. You're getting poked. In fact, weren't you yesterday telling me, hey, Sheldon, when the room is silent, call on me?
No, I did not say that.
Dinah, right, I know, because we had a moment about that. I was very unoriginal. Dinah, come on. What is the thing that a TSC might expect to encounter when they go into an agency and say, hey, agency, I know the SafeGo guy just left, and the Hanover gal left before her, and the Travelers guy is coming in after me, but would you please write more with Encompass? What are you likely to hear? When are you going to lower your rates? Okay, so I would say if you haven't focused on an answer to that question, then you certainly can't do this. And I would argue that you need to do this if you expect to hear that response. Now, some of you could pull that out of your back pocket and nail it right now. If you stuck a phone in front of me and asked me to make an outbound account rounding call in front of all of you, I can nail it. Do you know why I could nail it? It's not because I have confidence and a great attitude, which I do. No, I do. I have a great attitude about it because I've been selling for a while. But the fact that I've been selling it for a while and have made hundreds of those tells you what? I've done it 100 times. Not 100 times, thousands of times. So if you know that you're going to go into the field, just like a CSR knows she's going to pick up the phone, or he, although 90% of them are women in my experience, if you know you're going to hear a customer say, my rates went up by X percent, would you shop my policy? And usually it doesn't sound that nice, right? What do you say in response? I'll tell you what I hear in response. Actually, I'm not going to tell you. This is me reining in the ADD, the shiny nickel to go down dialogue, which we're going to have a chance to do, because I want to give you the tools to go into your agency and immediately begin to add value by helping them deal with the very thing that you face when you go in there. Price pressure, a feeling like you haven't earned the right to ask, a feeling like you might have to apologize for what has been in the past. So buy in, I got to want to do this thing, and then I can pick one or two things that allow me to rehearse, practice, repetition. Now, how do we know this works? How do we know the practice has paid off? It's easy. Say it. How do you know it works? You see the results. You guys are saying, Sheldon, this is so obvious. You see the results, right? So how do you see the results? You measure. You count. But there's a problem with counting, and there's a problem with measurement, and I'm going to speak to it momentarily. So here's the mashup of those 4 elements of the sweet spot. I want you to keep these things in mind, and as I move into the next phase of my presentation right now, I want you to think about the degree to which you're bought in. I believe that that's here. The fact that you're here getting treated so well in a company that is investing so much in helping you be successful. I can't imagine, if you're not bought in, you probably won't last that long here. But what is the area of focus that you yourself, not the company gave its strategic focus, but your tactical execution is a day-to-day moment. Is it wake up an hour earlier, go to bed an hour later? Is it change how you handle email? There's countless ways that you could improve your outcomes, but you need to pick 1 or 2 that you can focus on, repeat them, practice again and again and again, and then see the outcomes. And here's the problem with outcomes. The charts that we saw today, every single one of them focused, correct me if I'm wrong, people who put charts up, on end results, on a final measurable goal, or it mapped a trend. Now, there's a lot of executive power in the room and a lot of leadership power, and they say, look, I don't want you to get process paralysis. People, you got to focus on the victory. That's the goal. I say, yeah, the problem with just focusing on the victory is you don't get a chance to isolate the things that shape the victory. So if you think about the winning the game, winning the championship, winning the deal, what do you have to do? And I thought, okay, as a coach, when my team gets focused on that, they actually get in their heads a little bit more. And where do you want a player to be? Or if you're just learning a new skill, or if you're a skier, where do you want your head to be? Think about it. You're in the moment right now playing a point. Where do you want your head to be? In the moment. In the moment, exactly. And so our tendency to focus on outcome rather than process presents a paradox. And here's the paradox. The more that we focus on the end result, the more that we focus on the outcome, the more it impedes our ability to improve the outcome, because we no longer have a view of the little things that drive the big things. So what would that be in the agency example? The things that I'm going to talk about later, I'm going to show you how I measure, are the number of asks. You can't say, as an agency owner does, hey, I need you to cross-sell more. Here's how much we cross-sold at the end of this period. What I say is, well, out of how many quotes? And even that's not enough, because what drives quotes? The number of asks that you make, like how many asks? And let's suppose someone made 10 asks. Is that good? You made 10 asks, you got 5 quotes, you bound 1. Is that good? None of you can answer that question, because you have to ask another question. If you made 10 asks, what's the other question? How about out of how many people did you talk to? What if you made 10 out of 10? How's that for an ask rate? That's 100%. That's outstanding. I can tell you right now, in agencies that I visit across the country, it's 7%. It's a 7% ask rate in the cross. And I know this because I collect this data, and I'm going to show you how I collect it. It's an ancient technology called pen and paper. Okay, so buy-in, focus, practice, measure. I'm going to skip this poll in the interest of efficiency and expediency, because I want to get this thing interactive. So the next question is a polling question, but I'm skipping it because I have the right to do that. I want to talk about measurement. Beyond measuring process, now to outcome. And when I bring this to the agency, this is how they feel. This is how I want to say we, the collective we, because when we get measured, sometimes we worry we won't measure up. It can be hard to present yourself for all to see and the results, because if the results are low, we begin to feel low. If the results aren't what we know they should be or what's being asked of us, it can feel intimidating, it can feel demoralizing. And I think actually that's one of the biggest problems at an agency with metrics. Not that they're only presenting outcome, but an agent would feel helpless, or a CSR would feel helpless. And you might feel helpless if you're presented with the results about flatline quote rate at a particular agency. What can I do about that? I feel like I'm just such a failure because I'm not able to tick that number upward. I can't influence that number. Every time I go, the CSRs are busy, or I can never get FaceTime with the CSR, or the agency owner doesn't give me the time of day and just sends me to 1 or 2 CSRs, or I give them some information and I don't know whether it trickles down. There's all sorts of things that could impact our sense of self when we're held to account for ourselves. And the other thing that makes it difficult is it's a hassle. It's a hassle. When I present this to the agency, I say, oh, God, Sheldon, it's one more thing to do. Can I just run a report on my AMS 360? I said, well, your AMS 360 tell you how many touches that you had in your phone, unique customer contacts, and how many asks that you made. Oh, yeah, Sheldon, we just code that as a cross-sell ask. Later on, I'll tell you, I'm going to model what the cross-sell ask that I hear when they ask. In fact, I'm going to play a recording of it. So here's the challenge with metrics. I just want to be aware of this. So as you go to improve your outcomes, it's being demanded of you, think about buy-in, focus, practice, measure. And the measurement for yourselves needs to be drilled down into a sense of, okay, how effective can I be at the little stuff, getting airtime with the right CSRs, making sure that the CSRs get to practice their answer to a customer pushback about price. I'm skipping this poll, and I'm going to go right to measurement. This is what it looks like. This is what it looks like right here. So I want you to take a look at, I'm going to just come over here. I know my pointer doesn't work. This is a small shop. This is fourth quarter last year. Sean, Lisa, Maria, Lauren. 1, 2, 3, 4 CSRs. Actually, Sean is a personal lines producer. And they were like, first of all, this is an agency that says, we ask all the time, Sheldon. We're a results and sales-driven organization. We're always asking. I said, okay, you just humor me. Can we just track for a period of time? Usually the endurance lasts 8 weeks, so 2 months. Could we just track for a period of time the number of unique inbound customer touches that you get in your agency? Because if you ask all the time, if you talk to, in this case, 133 people, the number of asks should be 133. Well, no, Sheldon, you can't ask everybody. I said, well, right, you just told me you ask everybody, so let's be real and talk about when you ask, and who you ask, and how you ask. So this requires a level of self-reporting and honesty that I get when I go into an agency, because we are, what's that first circle? Who remembers? They are, we are bought in. So I get the honesty, I get the metrics that I want because people are bought into it, and I generate excitement about the process that we're going to embark upon. For the most part, you can lead a horse to water, but you can't make them all drink. So moving right along, I just want you to see what I circled. Now, so take a look. It's easy to get lost in the averages, right? This agency is asking 15%, 13, 17% of the time, less than 20% of the time. So round that up to 20. That means 80% of the customers that call in are never getting any sort of ask. Any sort of ask. That's what that means, right? Right. So, and now look at Maria. The first week, she's at 6%. Now, well, you might say to Maria, you're less than half of what everybody else is doing. Ask more. Remember what I said about telling a sad person not to be sad? What did I say? It doesn't work. Maria, just ask more. Okay, the next week, it's actually 8.9%, and the week after that, it's 20%. We were doing more than asking her to ask more. We were giving her opportunities to actually practice and face what it is that I said limits us most of the time. What is it that limits us most of the time? Or some feeling, right? Whether it's fear, maybe fear is too strong. It's a feeling that limits us, and the thoughts about it, right? And hers were, it's not my job, that's why we have a producer, and then we got peeled another layer deeper, and then it became, they're going to say no anyway. People already spend too much on insurance. Could you imagine, does this sound like it's that foreign a possibility to imagine people saying this at the desk? Am I stretching here? No, not at all. This is the dialogue that goes on. And can you imagine the results that flow when someone is thinking they're going to say no? They already spend too much on insurance. It's not my job. Can you imagine the results that flow? Yes, you can. There they are, a 15% ask rate. Call it 20, that's 80% of the time. Now, are you going to be able to cross-sell everybody? No. I can tell you high-performing agencies, the ask rate is usually in the 30% range, peaking at 50. You can't ask everybody because some of them are rude and nasty and mean and grouchy, and you want to send them to Geico, okay? That's true. It's true. You can't ask everybody. You can't ask everybody. So I see Maria, and I'm like, wow, Maria, you are trending in which direction? What is Maria doing? Where is she trending? Say again? The right way, absolutely. I don't say, hey, Maria, sell more. We talk about, Maria, what gets in the way of you selling more. And now let's get in practicing, bringing out loud those limiting beliefs and practicing how you can surmount them with words out of your mouth at the point of sale. And look where Maria trends. Okay, enough about that. Let's take a look at how this applies no matter what the outcome is that we want to influence. Here's an agency, an Illinois agency that I worked with. I'll just say Forest Insurance. Anybody have Forest Insurance? They're outside Chicago, Oak Park. That area, they were saying, Sheldon, we're getting killed on remarketing. And Sheldon, the sales guy, says, well, can't you, some of these remarkets, the rate went up single-digit %. Let me just go on record. Sometimes when it's a huge increase, it's difficult not to avoid, and you end up shopping it. But do agencies shift when a customer says the rate went up by some 2, 3, 5, 6, 10%? Does that ever happen? Does it? All the time it happens. A customer says, my rate went up by $10 a month. Will you shop this? To which the CSRs dutifully reply, what? Sure, let me go ahead and diminish the value to the agency, switch carriers, and diminish value to you because you're telling me to do that. That's what happens. And this agency said, look, we got to stop. So in the interest of focusing on process, not outcome, we said, what could you say? Wouldn't it be nice if you could tell someone before you shop them, you're good where you are? You're good where you are. Before you spend an hour shopping a package policy. Sheldon, we can't do that. If a customer tells us that we have to shop, we have to shop. Not if I was in that seat. If a customer says you have to shop, I would say, in fact, I'm going to get into my workshop now. We meet with empathy and then a reasonable explanation about downside. Is there downside to shopping? We're going to talk about this in the workshop piece. So if you conceptually understand that there's a downside, you might just think of them off the top of your head. You shift to a place where the price is going to go up next time. You need a new home inspection. You might lose credit that you have built up towards deductible dividends if you have that, or accident forgiveness if you have that. There's some downside. So I definitely want to save you money, Pat. That's important for us to sit, but I just want to make sure that you understand some of the risks if we move you. Here's the risk. For that reason, I think you are good where you are. That's a dialogue that's difficult to have. Would you agree? It's difficult to have because we have to buck the trend of what we've been doing, being a reactive service clerk who says, I have to do what my customer says. Look, I know a lot more about insurance than you do, Mrs. Customer, and I'm here to serve you. But part of that service means making sure you have the best protection with the best company at the best possible rate. So right now I have you with an amazing company called Encompass, and I think you're good where you are, right? You've got to focus on that dialogue and practice it if you're saying it a bunch of times. So look what happened to this agency when we got focused. First of all, they weren't getting killed. It was this many shop requests per week. 7, 9, 8 shop requests per week. And look what happened is week after week, we worked on the dialogue and we role-played. Everybody's least favorite activity, role play. We kept more and more policies as they were without changing deductibles, without trimming coverage. That's what happens when you focus on something and count it. And the owner was all focused on revenue and end results and retention numbers. I said, no, can we focus on counting what happens when the phone call rings and a customer says, my rate went up, will you shop it? Here's another one. Oh, this was a gratitude and focus. So I want to tell you that measurement doesn't have to show up in a spreadsheet, some accountability mechanism. Anybody here ever wake up early in the morning to go work out with a group? How many times do you miss it when it's not a group and it's just yourself? All the time. All the time I miss it. If I make an appointment with myself, I almost always miss it. If I make an appointment with you, I almost always keep it. So I started this gratitude and focus practice, and the exercise was put a red X every time you do this thing. And here was the thing. Immediately upon rising, breathe life into my body and think of 3 things that I'm grateful for. This is immediately, alarm goes off. My old habit was snooze button. So this was a gratitude and focus. 3 things I'm grateful for, 3 things I'm looking forward to, and I changed the model here. This is 3 things to make your life better. I was 3 things to build my business. What are the 3 things that I'm going to focus on? And they could be recurring strategic projects, right? Like writing copy for my website or whatever it was. And put a red X every time you do it. Check out October. How do I look? Come on, how do I look in October, people? Can I get some love? Pretty solid. Pretty solid. And then, by the way, a half X means I did it after I brushed my teeth because I forgot. You try this, and you will find yourself thinking about 3 things I'm grateful for. I got this. I'm grateful for the barbecue. I got to clean the barbecue. Oh, got to go to Lowe's. I don't have time to go to Lowe's. And then you're brushing your teeth, and it's a half hour later, and you realize you still haven't done the other elements of the practice. So I gave myself a half an X when it happened, not immediately upon rising. And look what happens in November. What happens in November? The black X, I just didn't have a red marker. What happened in November? Why did I slack off? Holidays. Why else? And what happens when you slack off? What happens when you miss a day? What do you say? What's that? I'll start again tomorrow. But it's like, I'll tell you, here it is. Well, I'm already feeling grateful. Things are fine. I'm staying focused. I don't need to do this thing anymore. And a whole slew of rationalizations and justifications, including the holiday, including vacation, including visiting family, started to flow from my original intention. That's what happened. What do you suppose happened in December? What's that? Hey, thank you for not having any faith in me. You're absolutely right. It got worse. It got worse. It was a complete blank. You know why? Because the ship had sailed. I blew it. I failed yet again. Sheldon, here you are. You get a big spark of inspiration. You go nuts doing it, and then you fizzle. And you fizzled in November. You've already lost 10 days. Why bother? And then I heard that dialogue carry me through December. And then what happened in January? Have faith. I started again. I said, you know what? It doesn't matter. Every time I can make a new choice, every day, every moment, I can make a new choice. And the justification, the rationalizing mind brought me down to a single moment of choice. And that was the place of power. And so I want to turn to some other experts when we can think about isolating power, the power of choice in the moment. So I want to give you a bunch of NASA geeks.
Telling me you can only give our guys 45 hours? That brings them to about there. Gentlemen, that's not acceptable.
We gotta talk about power here. Whoa, guys! Power is everything. Power is everything. Without it, they don't talk to us, they don't correct their trajectory, they don't turn the heat shield around. We gotta turn everything off. Now. They're not going to make it to re-entry.
What do you mean everything?
With everything on, the LEM draws 60 amps. At that rate, in 16 hours, the batteries are dead, not 45. And so's the crew. We got to get them down to 12 amps.
How many? You can't run a vacuum cleaner on 12 amps, John.
You got to turn off. You have to turn off the radars, cabin heater, instrument displays, the guidance computer, the whole smack.
Whoa, guidance computer. What if they need to do another burn? Gene, they won't even know which way they're pointing.
The more time we talk down here, the more juice they waste up there. I've been looking at the data for the past hour.
That's the deal?
That's the deal.
Okay, John. The minute we finish the burn, we'll power down the line. All right.
Power is everything, he says. And with that statement, an entire team of NASA engineers got single-mindedly focused on one purpose: conserving power in the command module. That was the single-minded purpose. And if we think of that as a metaphor for isolating the thing that is going to give us power, we have an opportunity to begin to affect change. And when I think about isolating the thing that can give us power, I think about the power of habit. And I'm going to pull from the work of an author named Charles Duhigg. This is a deep book, 300-odd pages, and I want to talk about one concept in the book, the power of habit. And he describes what's called the habit loop. Now, all of us operate in habit loops all the time. And like the comfort zone, we should operate there all the time until such time as what? When you want to grow, when you want to do something new that's outside of your status quo. Correct? Correct. So here we are in habit loops. And you think of a habit loop from the mundane to the profound. The way you wake up, when your routine, I'll bet you, is almost always the same when you get the cue, alarm clock. My routine is I go up and I get my cup of pre-made coffee that I set the night before. Indeed, that's part of my routine. I don't brush my teeth because I'm about ready to get it all stinky with coffee. I brush my teeth after the coffee. My wife wakes up, goes immediately to the bathroom, and brushes her teeth. That's her routine. You all have them. You have your routines, and there's a reward at the end of that routine. So you have a cue. A cue can be a time, a place, an event, a circumstance, an emotion, and you fall into your routine. And that routine satisfies a reward. Now, to take this abstraction and make it concrete, I'll point out his illustration. He was noticing that he was putting on weight, Charles Duhigg, the author, and he wasn't happy with his weight gain at the office. And he started mapping his behaviors, his habits. And he noticed that his cue, every workday at around 2:30 in the afternoon, he'd get a hankering to go up to the cafeteria. And he'd get a high-calorie or sugary snack at the cafeteria, go find a group of friends, and sit down with this group of friends and eat this high-calorie or high-sugary snack, kibitz with his friends, and then go back down to his desk, 15, 20, 30 minutes later. And this cycle continued, and his weight gain continued. Now, as you look at the graphic, what do you notice about the reward? What is it a picture of? Socializing. Who said that? He's socializing. The craving wasn't for calories. The craving is always in the middle of the loop. The craving was for companionship, for conversation. And he realized once he isolated his craving that he could substitute a different reward. And the reward was, actually, it was the same reward, but he changed the routine. The reward was go up to the cafeteria and meet with people. He took an apple, took a bottle of water, and he realized, wow, at 2:30, I'm sick of being at my cubicle all day long. I do this myself because I work at home as well. When I'm not at agencies and when I'm not on the road, I notice certain routines. And I confessed to one of them earlier. When my brain starts to seize up, my creativity loss, I go to YouTube. And a YouTube distraction isn't a 90-second one. Sometimes it's dangerous because it becomes 20 minutes if you're into things like epic mountain bike fails like I am and so forth. It can be dangerous. That's my routine. So I was paying attention to this, and I put a 30-pound dumbbell under my desk. And I said, the cue, a level of boredom or resistance or anxiety, instead of gutting my way through that, because the craving, I realized in the middle, was for a break and was for an avoidance of this feeling. I substituted a different reward, which wasn't a YouTube distraction. It was pull out this 30-pound dumbbell. And if any of you have lifted 30 pounds, you can't do a whole lot of reps with that. So it's not like it was a long distraction. It was a short distraction, but it satisfied the craving. Okay, so whether it's the snooze button in the morning or whether it's the social media account in the afternoon, you have habit loops. Just like your agents that you're seeking to influence have habit loops. So we're going to spend our afternoon isolating so we can focus on, I can follow my own medicine, particular habits that we could help them change. The behavioral patterns that we can help change. We're going to focus on them, we're going to repeat them, and we're going to count. Now, I want you to take a moment to think about some of the loops in your life that don't serve you. Now, to expand your thinking, I want to go beyond your work life. But I would encourage you to think about both your personal and your professional life. In fact, this is a chance for us to do the poll. I have one or more unhelpful habits that I would like to change. Let's take this either personally or professionally. So just take a moment and think, that loop was helpful. It's a simple schematic that isolates cue, routine, reward, craving in the middle. Do you have something that's a cue? Remember, it's a person, it's a place, a thing, a time, an event, and you fall into the same routine. Now, you might not know what the reward and the craving is, but you identify it as an unhelpful pattern. Well, if we were going deep in a small group, all grouped, hugged, and loving on each other, I would say, hey, let's talk about what these are and make them in the personal realm, because I'll bet you there's some shared challenges here. Now, if one of them has to do with chemical addiction, that's really difficult. He's got a whole chapter in the book, and I'm not going down that road, right? Because, well, there's a whole lot more involved when it comes to consciously being able to make a change, because the way that you make a change, I'm going to give you in a handout right now. In fact, I photocopied and customized a flowchart that Charles Duhigg created in the back of this book to help you isolate. And since so many people on the survey said, yes, I can identify one or two unhelpful habits that don't serve me, and I confessed already to some of mine, right? Like YouTube distractions. I went through this worksheet, and I want you to be able to go through this worksheet. And right now, we're beyond the opportunity, or this is the inappropriate opportunity to have a discussion about this. My hope is that on your way home, maybe tonight as you're settling into your room, breaking before we go to whatever the next event is, which I'm delighted and I'm very much looking forward to participating in, since my flight's not till tomorrow. I invited myself, by the way, gentlemen, to your other party tonight. So as you think about isolating habits, right, and I played that video from Apollo 13 to help us think of that as a metaphor for how powerful it can be when you zero in on one or two things. Zero in on one or two things and pay attention to them and observe them. I did that with the metric sheets that I demonstrated, right, from the agencies. I showed 3 different metrics, including my own. That helps disrupt a habit. when you count and you see it in bold relief. So the agent that says, we ask all the time, sees that it's actually 13% of the time. They can say, wow, I guess we don't ask all the time. Then the next thing is to improve results is, how are you asking? What do you say? Do you say, do you want fries with that Coke? By the way, that's what I hear a lot. I'm going to workshop. You're going to hear a script that sounds very much like, do you want fries with that Coke? Very ineffective ask when it comes to being an advisor, a trusted, licensed professional who's looking out for people's protection. Okay, so what I want to do is ask you to take this private journey of habit change on your own. And when you think about habit change, despite the fact that our results are on display for all to see, ultimately, it's a very private affair. In fact, I believe one of our speakers this morning talked about that. It's really the way you translate strategy into execution is your daily behavior. And the way you improve daily behavior is by being rigorously honest with yourself, just like I am with agents. And we put the numbers up on board and we enter the judgment-free zone. And we don't say, hey, your ask rate is low, ask more. We say, hey, our ask rate is collectively this area. What do you suppose is getting in the way? I'm scared that I'm going to get rejected. Good for you. So is everybody else here. And we talk that through. And we practice working that through with language that's compelling. And does it shift right away? No. It's the aggregation of marginal gains, how it shifts. And when I think about this being a private journey in a very public space, I was reminded of a poem, a beautiful poem that I heard from an author named Maya Stein. And those of you who are into poetry, which is probably all one of you, because it's kind of geeky, and I never got into poetry other than the fact that I met this woman, and she added me to her weekly poetry practice. And now I get a 10-line poem every Tuesday from Maya Stein. And as I think about this private journey in a public space, I think about what she wrote of the quiet hum of industry. And she wrote, you wouldn't have noticed that she was making a bookshelf out of paper, or that he was figuring the math for a skateboard ramp, or how the backyard was plotting next summer's harvest. It would have been impossible to recognize a musician turning an ear toward a field of rustling corn, or the painter puzzling over the weave of a blank canvas. But this is where the work gets done, this quiet hum of industry away from the world's fluorescent attention, with the beauty, untheatric as a sea lion tottering off the docks into the salted, murky waters of the Pacific. This is where the work gets done, she says. In other words, this work of improvement, despite the fact that we're in a public domain with our results in public for all to see, it's a solo journey. It's a solo journey. And because it's a solo journey, we know that this process of outcome change demands behavior change. And we know that behavior change demands habit change. And habit change requires we be vigorously honest with ourselves. So for that reason, I would like to end, before I take questions, the way that I began. And I think you will all know the answer when I ask you, I am your greatest helper or your heaviest burden. I will push you onward or I will pull you down. I am completely at your command. I am easily managed. You must merely be firm with me. Show me exactly how you want something done, and after a few lessons, I will do it automatically. I am the servant of all great people, and alas, all failures as well. Those who are great I have made great. Those who are not, I have made them too. You may run me for profit or run me for ruin. It makes no difference to me. Take me, train me, be firm with me, and I will lay the world at your feet. Ignore me, and I will ruin you. All together now, what am I? Habit. There it is, everybody. Thank you. I appreciate you listening to me. I look forward to our workshop. Anybody brave enough to launch a question right now about any aspect of this? And I promise you we'll get much more interactive in the afternoon when we get, yes? Yes. Do the 3 things I'm grateful for. I love that you picked up on that one. That's a great practice, and it helps when you wake up. Nobody raise your hand. I'll raise my hand. Some days I wake up and I feel a knot of anxiety in my stomach about the pressure that I'm facing. Income pressure, big deal pressure, this pressure. Like, oh my God, I woke up today and I'm thinking, oh my God, shit, I gotta rehearse more. Here's how I rehearse. Index cards. And you know what makes it go away? I'm grateful for the fact that I have a soft bed in a nice hotel and I have a hot shower. And that anxiety, when you do that, and then you think, what am I looking forward to today? I'm looking forward to smiles, nods of approval. I'm looking forward to interactive exchange. I'm looking forward to helping. All of a sudden, that whole cloud lifted, and it took all of about 90 seconds. So it changes every day. And sometimes recurring themes come up. Healthy kids, beautiful kids. Yeah, thank you. That's a great question. Anybody else? Question or comment? Yeah, I knew someone would bust the silence. By the way, before you talk, can I just tell you, my inner dialogue was going, oh my God, someone talk. And then a coach of mine who said, Sheldon, let them sit with the tension. You ask them a question, and that tension, your minds are working right now. So that's true when you're at this, when you ask a difficult question of CSRs too, right? Or when we're trying to make sales, we tend to want to fill the dead air with our own voice. I'm sorry, I couldn't resist. Thank you for breaking the silence.
That's good, absolutely. So I'm really glad that you brought up retention. You know, you talked about customer retention. Customers call in, they ask to be remarketed. So out there in your work with agents, I don't know how many agents you touch each year, but is that a frequent theme, customer retention? Is that something that you find you dedicate a major portion of your practice to, or just
Absolutely.
Give us context
What's
for
the
that?
after base level of service, minimum table stake level of service, what's the biggest driver of retention at the agency? With CSR delivering on the service promise, what is the biggest driver of retained business at an agency? Study after study. Agent what? Agent involvement, you're getting close. How about depth of relationship? How about number of policies in force? Who are the most vulnerable clients at an agency? Single policy. And then it's the dual line policy that's all price focused. So you add things like even EFT. What does that do to retention? Boost. So if you're focused, buy and focus, practice, measure. I hate billing questions. I hate cancellations for non-pay. I'm going to get focused on EFT. That means I have to practice the ask. Hey, Aaron, would you like the option of electronic billing? Say no. Oh, okay. Buy and focus, measure with 0. Where was the practice? Are you going to ask, hey, Aaron, would you like the option of electronic billing? And everybody says no. Shouldn't you, if EFT is important because it's a driver of retention, and I'm just saying the one that doesn't even add revenue. It doesn't even add revenue. But the depth of policy, whether the commercial line is cross-sold to personal lines. Personal line is sold to life and health if that exists in an agency, right? These are the things that drive retention after base level of service, which means you answer the phone courteously and promptly and you deliver. Is that, by the way, does anybody have another statistic that drives retention more than the depth of relationship with the customer? Is there another driver in your experience? What drives retention more than policy count with the customer?
I don't think so. I think we get tripped up on price because that's the thing that's most often thrown in our face as a reason for taking action. And price is important.
Absolutely price matters. And someone said price. You say, hey, Sheldon, you're full of crap up there talking about the depth of relationship and the number of policies. If the rate goes up by 50%, we're going to lose that. I was like, yeah, okay, so rate absolutely impacts retention. But when the work that I do is the business that's flying out the door when someone says the rate went up by a few bucks, people are shopping. You see that, yes? And the agents are quick to do it. I'm like, look, just like you can't make all asks all the time, you're not going to save every remarket request, but could we save it by one this week? Aggregation of marginal gains. Don't say, oh, we have to remarket all customers. How about one less a week? The one who comes in and their rate went up by a single-digit %, let's focus on keeping that one and saying, you're good where you are before you spend an hour to come to the same conclusion. That's what I mean when I say focus. So I'm not universal in any of my declarations here. But if remarket's pressure, it comes down to your personal habit. And there's a loop. Q, customer complains about rate. Routine, I say, well, let's take a look at the deductibles. We raise the deductibles, that will bring the rate down. Oh, that didn't do it. Next thing is, let me shop it for you. As opposed to what I'm going to say in the afternoon workshop. And I'm going to model it. And then you guys can take it to the field and you can practice it. And then all will be well. No, it won't all be well. 1% gains again and again and again and again. The next thing you know, that chart goes like that. Thank you for breaking the silence with that great question.
I have a question for you, Sheldon. So you referenced a slide that talked about Maria, the account executive, who basically had fewer touch points than the other account executives in the agency, right?
Fewer asks.
Or fewer asks, I
on
should say,
virtually the same volume.
Yeah. So the question that I have is, and when you start thinking about how you change behaviors, what's your process? Are you an educator? Do you do a tell, show, do? Other than just pointing out the mere fact that, look, the numbers show that you're not trending in the right direction, what are you doing to improve that?
Literally. Okay, so the first thing is shine a light on it. Get buy-in, focus, practice, measure. So, hey, gang, we're all in this together, right? This is an agency meeting. When I meet with an agency, it's a face-to-face kickoff, right? Where there's a level of intimacy that you can't get on a conference call. And people talk about the people. I'll just talk to the agency. I'll say that your table is an agency. And I listen to them talk about the things that are challenging. Right? And we agree. But then we get reconnected to why we're in this business. And when I ask CSRs in particular, and producers and agency owners in general, about why are we in this business, what is our business? What business are we in? Invariably, and we're going to talk about this in the afternoon workshop, it comes down to we're in the business of protection. We make people whole. We help people, protect them, and we mitigate risk. And on and on and on it goes. In fact, my question to prompt this is this a noble profession? That's what I ask. I'm going to show you the slide that I use in the afternoon workshop. So we'll have a discussion. Is this a noble profession? And if you equate nobility with Mother Teresa and Desmond Tutu, forget that. Just think about valuable, important, and worthwhile. And people say yes. And then I say why. And guess what I do? I whiteboard all the reasons why. And how often does the word I save people money show up when I ask, is it a noble profession? Guess how often it shows up? Never. I have done this exercise dozens of times, and I say, is this a noble profession? Everybody says, yes, yes, yes. I said, if you say yes, you have to say why. And that's a 5-minute exercise where we capture. I had one owner say, look, we're like the wheels of an economy. I said, what do you mean? He goes, you can't open up a daycare. This is a heavy commercial line. You can't open up your landscape truck. You can't anything without me. I need to provide you protection. Workers' comp, I'm like, wow, that's true. That's definitely, you're integral to the economy. There's a nobility. So it begins there, getting people to reconnect to our purpose. And so then it becomes a matter of translation. And here's the translation. Service or sales, when you come from a place of integrity, is the flip side of that same coin of service. So I'll give you an example. If you call to add a teen driver to the vehicle, and I don't mention umbrella protection, and boosting liability limits, am I really doing a good service? Forget about selling, forget about closing. Am I delivering good service if all I do is say, is there anything else I can help you with? I've added your RAV4, taken off your Mazda 5. Is there anything else I can help you with? If you're nothing other than an administrative clerk, and this is what I say, this is the conversation we have in an agency. If your job is admin, then you're going to be quickly replaced. Actually, I don't use that language, but we know they'll be replaced because they're slow and inefficient. But if your job is advice, counsel, and I also say, how many people are licensed? Most of the hands in the room go up. I go, as a licensed professional, do you study this? Yes. Do you have to continually study this? Yes. So do you know more than the insureds? Yes. Who educates our insureds? We do. And I say, nope, trick question. Geico, Flo, Progressive, they educate your influence. It's a $30 billion media assault that educates your insureds. So this is a kumbaya moment where everybody, I get them going, yeah, you're right. We educate. We're in the business of re-educating because they come to us educated, thinking price is all that matters. And I'm in the business of re-educating, which is a slow process of steady attention. We connect to our purpose, which is noble. And then I say, in the moment of choice, customer calls and says whatever they say, I need a new vehicle or shop my rate. In that moment, we have a chance to either be clerks or advisors. And so Maria gets all fired up to be an advisor, and then I actually role play. What would you say? And I have a 7-word ask. You remember my 7-word ask, I hope. No, maybe you don't. You remember BTFAR. But I'm going to share it with you. I'll just tell you now. I noticed that. May I ask why?
And the reason I ask is because I think that's so critical and so important is that you have to leave them with something. And they're consultants, we're consultants. And so to impart that, right, that knowledge, that wisdom, is to me where the rubber really hits the road in any type of work that we're doing in the agency. Because if we just simply say they're missing out on something, how are we showing them? How are we changing that? And I think that's where you're getting.
So that word, so right away, I'm just going to go to that word, and we have 4 minutes. I know the human butt threshold's 90 minutes. We're not quite there. According to this, we got 4 minutes and 25 seconds, and I'm taking it. Can I take it, or are you raising your hand to shut me up? You want a question? Okay, but I just want to follow through because it's so important that you have a theoretical understanding of what I'm saying, but you marry it with words out of your mouth. Like, I have to be able to execute in the moment of choice, right? What is my habit? That's what I'm up here talking about. And if my habit is to say, is there anything else I can help you with? To break that habit, I need to have some mechanisms, the peer accountability, the group, the tracking. And I'm saying, let's insert the new routine. The new routine is to experiment with words like Karina. Karina's the CSR, and I say, hey, Karina, the next time you finish the task, vehicle change, coverage question, billing question, whatever it is, experiment with words like, hey, well, I've got you on the phone, or well, your account's up, or now that that's all done, I noticed that. That's our job, to notice that you're missing X, Y, Z. So it's kind of a lie. It's marketing speak. I say it's 7 words to sales success. It's actually 7 words, but you got to insert. I noticed, Karina, that you currently don't write your personal insurance with us because you called for a commercial auto. Oh, we're not commercial here. You don't currently have what's called umbrella protection. Do you mind if I ask, are you familiar with what that is and why you don't have that? Do you hear how my 7 words became actually 27? Because that's the script. And I say, look, take a script. Here's my framework. I noticed that, may I ask why, and make it your own. But not so much that your own that you say this. Hey, Karina, I noticed that you don't have umbrella protection on your current policy. Would you like a quote for that? That's what I say to that ask. Right? Hey, I noticed that you don't have this. Do you want fries with that Coke? No, thanks. I called about an auto change. Hey, I noticed that you don't have tenants policy on your auto. Would you like a quote for that? No, thanks. That's like, do you want to supersize for 50 cents more? That's not advice. That's not counsel. And so in the agencies, I get them all excited about connecting to the fact that we have to step into our advisor role. And the advisor role says, hey, I noticed a couple of small gaps in coverage. There's language. I like that one. Hey, I noticed you're not taking advantage of all this potential savings opportunities that may be available to you. Correct? That's language that flows naturally through the force of what's circle 3? Practice, repetition. Do you mind if I ask why is the sales question? Do you mind if I ask you about that? I'm just curious, how come you don't have that protection in place? We're going to do this in the next workshop because what inevitably, if you're a CSR, think like a CSR, what are you saying to yourself? Sheldon, the big, powerful coach from the Northeast comes in and says, hey, just say I noticed that, may I ask why? What are you thinking if you're going to hear? You're a CSR, I give you that. What comes to mind? What? Oh, Jesus? Not, oh, Jesus, Sheldon's here. That's usually what happens. No, it's oh, Jesus, a sales guy. Sheldon, we're not in sales. You're really good at sales. It's like, oh, are you an advisor? Are you tap into their service role? Usually what happens, nobody wants to volunteer. If you're a CSR and Sheldon comes in and says, hey, just ask, I noticed that, may I ask why? A CSR is going to think what? Think resistance, think fear, think apprehension. What? Oh, I have to sell something like, well, it's actually what they do is they project an answer. They say, well, I noticed that. May I ask why? Well, I already have it elsewhere. My cousin owns an agency. I already pay too much for insurance. I don't want more insurance. I call to add it on. So where the CSR mind goes, and I don't mean to just keep focusing on the CSR, but for every one producer, there's a couple. I mean, CSRs are the front line. These are the people, when you go into agencies, and we're going to talk about this in the workshop, I love it that you get FaceTime with the owner. But if you had to pick between owner and connect CSR time, am I wrong to say meet with the CSRs? And leave them loving you, leave them with the tool. It's not just about the shiny object, it's about empowering them to say, okay, here's what I'm going to suggest you say when someone says, hey, Encompass is much more, or a little bit more. We're going to workshop this, all right? So you have your back pocket phrases. The CSR goes to objection, and I have 7 words to help them transition to that. And Pat, you're going to love the objection handling phrase because it goes to swagger and it goes to confidence. I don't like the word swagger because I think of an MMA fighter. I think of swagger as kind of empty, ego-driven confidence. But I want to go to deep core level confidence that's a true source of strength. Like Nelson Mandela has swagger without being cocky, right? Martin Luther King had swagger without being cocky. That beardish Irish MMA fighter with the tattoos on it, he's got tons of swagger, but I also think deep down in his dark of his soul, he's got a super fragile ego. Conor McGregor. All right, see how long I go? 90 seconds. Who's got another question? Kathy.
And you might cover this in the workshop, Sheldon, but what would you say is the most effective driver for sustaining those good habits once CSRs kind of get their practice down, they try it, they work with customers, and then they sustain that good habit going forward?
The same thing that we need in our lives for sustaining good habits. What do we need in our lives to sustain good habits? Again and again and again. So back in the agency, like talking about the theme, during your visits, leaving them with homework and staying focused on there was once a great business leader who said a simple message relentlessly repeated kind of is a good to great thing. That's it. Repetition on it, looking at the numbers, tracking, and knowing that we rise and fall, that we ebb and flow. Our performance is not a straight line trajectory. As long as the trend is upward, we're going to get our ebbs and our flows, but we want to be trending upward. And for me, it's about steady attention to this. Role plays. You go into the agency, you bring your donuts, and you say, hey, everybody, let's play a game. It's going to be whoever gets the most natural sounding role play is going to get this $5 Subway gift card. We can talk about all sorts of ways to keep it alive. All right, now I'm 2 minutes and 8 seconds over. So with that, I think it's time to go eat food. Yeah? Thanks, everybody.